So in this case, as a mathematician, this would be a 3-to-1 battle, 1.5 to 2.5. You know, 3-to-1, the attacker should win 3 times, the defender should win 1 time out of 4. Very clear, very simple. You know, that's what mathematics says. That's the way it should work. That's not the way our players saw it. Basically, at a certain point, players feel they are going to win the battle. And they would come to me and said, you know, I had this battle. It was 3-to-1, and I lost. I was like, well, yeah, you know, 3-to-1. You're going to lose every once in a while. I said, no, you don't understand. It was 3-to-1. 3's big. 1 is small. I had the big number. Shouldn't I have won? So I realized, okay, there's something going on here. So we adjusted our system by actually breaking the battle up into kind of more atomic little battles to make the results come out more than the player expected. And then I watched some more players playing, and this time the player had 1 against 3. The player had 1, the little tiny 1, and the AI had the big gigantic 3. And I watched, and lo and behold, the player won the battle. And I said, doesn't that feel wrong to you? That you with your little tiny 1 won against the huge 3? And they said, no, doesn't feel wrong at all. I had, you know, clever tactics and a strategy, clean living. It all adds up to me winning. So we realized that something was going on there psychologically that isn't exactly mathematics. I'm not sure what it is, but it's not mathematics. So we made a few adjustments and said, okay, now are you happy with the way combat works? And we found that there is this point, and it's kind of around 3-to-1, 4-to-1, where people do expect to pretty much win every time. So okay, we said, okay, that's fine. We can live with that. Anything else? You know. They said, well, there's this one little thing. I'm okay. You know, here's a 2-to-1 battle. Are you okay with, you know, winning most of the time, but every now and then losing a 2-to-1? The player said, yeah. You know, 2-to-1. I'm okay with that. 2-to-1. I should win most of the time, but every now and then I can lose. So okay, good. So what's your problem? Well, I had this 20-to-10 battle, and I lost. It was 20-to-10. I said, yeah, 20-to-10. I had 10 more than the 10. I had 20. But isn't that, I said, you know, isn't that 2-to-1? 20-to-10? No, that's 20-to-10. That's a whole different odds than 2-to-1. Okay, so we actually adjusted, you know, okay, I can see you have 10 more, so that's a lot. Okay, cool. Okay, so now, you know, made the adjustment, gave the game back. Now are you happy? Well, kind of, but let me tell you what happened. I had this 2-to-1 battle, and I lost, which is okay. You know, we've had this discussion. I understand now that every now and then I'm going to lose a 2-to-1 battle. But right after that, I had another 2-to-1 battle, and I lost again. How can that be? How can I lose 2 2-to-1 battles? I mean, one I can understand. The computer's out to get me, obviously. Okay, so we actually take into account the results of previous battles now when we do our combat calculations. And then the player was very happy. And we don't really do this just to make the player happy, but it's really when something happens in a battle like this that feels wrong, we start to lose that suspension of disbelief. The player comes out of the game and starts to, you know, pay attention to other things that are going on, not what's in the game. So it's all part of the process of really trying to maintain the suspension of disbelief as the player is playing the game. And something really kind of clear and instructive about this process, I think, you know, the interaction between logic and science and math and psychology kind of really became clear to me in this process. And, you know, I think it all makes sense, but it's very counterintuitive. And I think one of the things about really including the psychological part of things in game thinking and design is that you're going to run into a number of counterintuitive things. And we'll see a little more of that later, but there are many times where that actually can work to your advantage. And it's not always quite the process that we just went through. So this part is called my bad. Times when I really screwed up and kind of came to realize that it was because my brain was too logical and scientific, and I hadn't really included a lot of the psychological aspects of what goes on in games. The first bad thing I did in life was to make Civilization a real-time game. The original prototype of Civilization was real-time, kind of inspired by SimCity and that genre of games where you're kind of watching something grow. SimCity, I think, inspired a lot of designers to branch out in kind of construction-oriented games, growth games. But what we found with the real-time version of Civilization was that the player really became an observer, was watching what's going on, was really just an observer. And the mantra that we had in mind for Civilization was, it's good to be king. And we found that when we made it a turn-based game, all of a sudden, lights went off. All of a sudden, the player was no longer an observer. They were the star of the game. They were the key ingredient, and they made things happen. Kind of ironic, since Civ is now the poster child for turn-based gaming, but Civ actually started off as a real-time game, and that was my bad. Sorry about that. Another bad thing that I did in the original Civilization design was to include this idea of rise and fall. Wouldn't it be cool if you built this cool civilization, and then, you had this kind of setback, and it started to crumble, and just before it disappeared, you rescued it, and you came back to win even more strong and powerfully than you did before. Wouldn't that be an awesome experience? No, not really. What we found was that just at the cusp of the crumble, most players would reload a save game, and they would never experience the glorious re-rise that we had in mind for them. So Civilization is basically a game about progress. It's a game about rise, and more rise, and not so much the fall. Another badness that I perpetrated was in the original Civilization tech tree. The idea that I had in mind was that technology would be this interesting path of kind of discovery through the darkness, and you would kind of never know where the different paths of technology would lead. It seemed to me totally wacky that you would be thinking, back in 3000 BC, okay, if I discover ironworking, someday I'm going to have gunpowder and nuclear weapons. So we randomized the tech tree. We did a lot of things to make that process kind of mysterious. But once players realized, generally the second time they played, that there was gunpowder out there, their only goal was, how do I get to gunpowder most quickly? Give me the road. Don't randomize. Don't mysterious size this thing. I know there's gunpowder out there. You can't fool me. And we understood that players want to be in control. They really want to know what's going on. And the kind of broader lesson from this for me was that any kind of randomness really needs to be treated with a lot of care. We also had the idea in the original Civilization of these kind of great natural disasters. Wouldn't it be cool to have like volcano Krakatoa blowing up, or the plague, and all these kind of famous world events happening in the game, kind of randomly? No, it wouldn't. Again, whenever anything random happens to the player, paranoia strikes in. Paranoia was one of our early psychological feelings. The player feels that the computer did that, rolled that random number just to make their life more difficult, or they were just about to win. So random events have to be treated very, very carefully because if they're significant, basically the player will find the worst and most paranoid explanation for what just happened in the game. Randomness at a low level certainly helps a lot to variety, replayability, things like that, but really need to be careful with randomness at a really significant level.